It is, right now, 1846. Your cell phones won't work. Just pay attention because the buzzing will stop. A quick history test. Things that are true to put you in the right mood. Things that are true as far as you know. James Polk is your president. The country ends at Kansas City. And, in general, a quick trick question, how large is San Francisco? Doesn't exist. How large is Charleston? About 6,000 people. It's 1846. There's where you will be living. Things that haven't happened yet. When's the Civil War? 1860. I'll take 1860 something. When's the gold rush? A hint, San Francisco 40 whaters. Okay, hasn't happened yet. The telegraph has just been invented, just up the road here. It was invented this year. That is the technology that will enable us to rule this entire country. But it's not here yet. Also, they haven't figured out this germ theory thing yet, so some of you might be starting to feel ill from lunch about now. It's interesting, reading the diaries of the immigrants in 1846, food poisoning was a big thing. The ADA hasn't been invented yet. FMLA hasn't been invented yet. JACO, OSHA, little round of applause, hasn't been invented yet. But here's my key point, and here's why I'm here as your luncheon keynote. The world was changing far more rapidly than culture could keep up with. And in that culture of rapid change, the business model was changing too quickly for regulations to stay in touch with it. Nobody was an expert, and greed and excitement drove expansion decisions. Does anyone see a parallel? It's just like today. And so therefore, the fate of what I'm about to describe is a terrific metaphor for the failure of modern business, and that a lot of what went wrong were human resource issues. So I guess my point is that if the Donner Party had had a human resources professional along with them, the HR person probably would have been eaten first. But lessons can be learned from an event more than 160 years old. Okay, quick show of hands. How many of you have heard of and understand the Donner Party? It's interesting, terrific. When I give this presentation in California, every hand goes up. When I give it in areas that are far from the trail, no hands go up. So I'm pleased that people paid attention in history class. For those that did not, here's the basic premise. In 1846, a group of Midwestern farmers went to California. No one really had been there before. People had not traveled overland to get there. And for us to get this nation together, we had to have people overland to California, or England was going to take it. And it was a part of Mexico. They got bad advice. A lot of bad things happened, which we're going to cover. And 81 of them were trapped over the winter in the Sierra Nevadas above modern-day Reno. Many of the half that survived had to resort to cannibalism to do it. Yes, at lunch we are going to talk about cannibalism. In modern terms, it would be as if you would put your fork down, go home, sell everything you own, and equip your Buick for a trip to the moon. It's a one-way trip. It'll take all the money you have. In modern terms, each of these immigrants cost them about $100,000 to make this journey. These were not poor people. But it's an engrossing story. Why it's interesting, and every 20 years somebody writes another book. A new one came out called Emigrant Passage. Failure is far more interesting than success. Delta Flight 935 arrives with no baggage lost. That's not news. Well, maybe it is these days. But a good failure has a lot more interest for us than a success. Well, let me share one. We've got human resources issues I want you to pay attention to. All the HR professionals, watch out. We've got poorly handled diversity and bad staffing. We've got leadership challenges. We've got no conflict resolution. We've got no team building and lots of interpersonal communication issues, just like Washington, D.C. Let me introduce you to a couple participants. I am a direct descendant of George Donner. George Donner at this point is 60 years old in his life. He's a successful farmer. He's twice widowed. He was born in North Carolina, lived in Kentucky and Indiana and Texas, off to Illinois, and then finally in California. People moved around a lot back then because it was mostly slash and burn farming. So now we need a villain. So he's a lawyer. Boo. He's a real estate agent. Boo. And he's convinced that if he can get eligible voting adults to California, he can be the empire. What do we mean by eligible voting? White male. Get a lot of them out to California and he can run them. So he was selling information on the best routes that people had never seen. Come with me. So he barnstormed the Midwest trying to get people to go. Just so you understand who else is on this journey with us, these are big Midwestern farm families. 8 kids, 7 kids, 6 kids. When we finally get trapped, more than half of the people that are trapped are under 16 years of age. So, in the beginning, let's start our trip. I found in the Springfield, Illinois Gazette a classified advertisement that somewhat explains why we're going. He's advertising, this is for those of us in staffing, this is a help wanted ad. He is advertising for ox drivers to join him and drive his teams. Who wants to go to California without costing them anything? As many as 8 young men of good character. Come, boys, you can have as much land as you want without it costing you anything. That's why he was going. Free land. He wanted 8 young men. This was a tough job. This was scary. These people were the astronauts of their day. He only got 3. The great thing in this world is not so much where we are, but where we are moving. Oliver Wendell Holmes. Again, as a nation, we are always driven to move forward, which is also, frankly, why we're going to survive this current downturn. We as a nation are equipped to handle this. So, let's make a stay or go decision. We're all risk managers. George Donner is successful in farming and business. He has young children. California is not even a part of the United States, and they're talking about war with Mexico. You know, he should not have gone. He's in his 60s. Well, of course, they went. On April 16th, 9 brand new wagons rumbled out of Springfield, Illinois, heading west. This was a one-way trip. The Lincoln family came over to say goodbye. And that's me sitting in the front of the wagon. We rode on the trail for a couple of days, and I'm here to tell you that you want to walk. We're only into the trip a day or two, and the mother-in-law of James Reed dies, basically shaken to death by this old wagon. They bury her here at Alcove Springs and take 2 or 3 days to carve her a nice headstone and bury her with Methodist hymns and spend some time on this. Start counting how many days they waste. Here it was 3. Also understand they had built her the first RV, first recreational vehicle in the United States. It was a double-decker wagon with spring cushions in the seats and a mirror and a side entrance, and it had a furnace with a little chimney poking out the top, and it took 8 oxen to pull it, and it was slow. She dies in the first 2 weeks. Do they ditch the RV? No. Pay attention to that. James Reed wandered over and carved his names on a rock while they're waiting to bury her. J.F. Reed, 26 May 1846. You are still able to find graffiti from the Donner Party if you follow the trail. Good news. The whole first half of this story, nothing unusual happened. The whole first 5 months. Every morning they'd get up and they'd go another 15 miles and they'd camp. And it just became a nice, monotonous trip. They came down here, see where the trail went down Windlass Hill. Their diaries wrote about this tree being beside the trail. It's still alive. The trail went right there by those trees in front of Chimney Rock. They scampered up and carved their names on it. Those are still there. They named everything. This was the Gibraltar of the West. I see why the red fire plug in the foreground was not there at the time. River crossings were risky because all of the women were in skirts, and they had sewn lead weights in the hems, just like drapes, to keep the prairie winds from showing their ankles. So if your wagon rolled on a river crossing, you would not come back up. Men could swim, women would sink.